again, 8th grade Timberwolves. This is Mrs. Stirk with the second episode in the saga of the Native American struggles as we study Westward Expansion. And, spoiler alert, you will soon find out in these next couple of videos, if you don't already know, that although the Native Americans valiantly defended their lands and culture, they were ultimately unsuccessful. In this video, we will start off in the 1850s. Up to this point, whites left the Plains Indians alone because they didn't think that the land was that important. They called it the Great American Desert and did not think it was very valuable. So they said, you know what, you guys go ahead. You can keep that. But as soon as the whites realized it was valuable, they used any means necessary to get it for themselves, not caring at all about the natives already inhabiting the land. Showed no regard at all. Just before the 1850s, gold was discovered in California, and miners, railroads, cattle drives, and farmers all quickly followed across the plains. As the whites and others moved west, though, it threatened the Indians on the plains, who at this time were nomadic, which meant that they traveled from place to place following the buffalo, or more correctly, the bison, which was their main resource for food, tools, and warmth. They also had completely different views about land. The natives used the land for agriculture and hunting, but they had no concept of owning it, or buying it, or fencing it in. It was there for everyone and the animals to live off of, and they were stewards of it for future generations. This led to increased conflicts, which in turn led to the U.S. government's reservation policy. It's the Native Americans who want to keep their land versus the settlers who want to kick the natives off of it ASAP. The natives wanted to protect their homeland and resources. They felt increasingly worried about more and more whites showing up and setting up shop like they owned the place. And then the settlers, on the other hand, believed it was their manifest destiny to spread across the continent and take this land from the savage and uncivilized natives. This again was due to racism. The whites believed that the natives would be better off if they were rescued from their savagery and taught to live like whites. And, of course, the settlers also didn't enjoy being attacked on their travels or having their homesteads and goods being raided and destroyed by angry Native Americans. So, for all of those aforementioned reasons of the settlers, and also because, hey, they'd already done this with the Cherokee when they forced them at gunpoint on a deadly march to Oklahoma, and it seemed to work out great. Well, for the white people. In 1867, the Indian Peace Commission came up with the Reservation Policy. The goal here was to move all the American Indians onto a few large reservations to hasten their civilization. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the responses of the American Indians to all of this. Well, some were persuaded to sell land because of the trickery and lies of the U.S. government. But the reality of the new reservations was not good. It was poor soil, didn't support agriculture or hunting. They were forced to rely on food and supplies from corrupt government agencies that never arrived, and shortly they were facing starvation. I'm going to play a quote for you about this from Red Cloud of the Oglala.
The people were desperate from starvation. We felt that we were mocked in our misery. We held our dying children and felt their little bodies tremble as their souls went out and left only a dead weight in our hands. Red Cloud, Oglala.
And so, understandably, resistance grew, especially from the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. Some felt the chiefs had no right to sell their land. So these Native Americans ignored the reservation policy and just went on hunting on their lands as before. They also started raiding white settlements in order to fight back against what they really felt was a threat. So, the U.S. government is just having a heck of a time controlling these pesky Indians and getting them to stay on the reservations like they're supposed to. I'm just being sarcastic, don't worry. They just keep wanting to go on hunting the bison like they have for hundreds of years. And then it hits them. Ah! That's it! The bison are the key! The Army officers and other United States officials realized if there were no more bison, then poof! That solves the problem of getting the Indians out of the way so the white settlers can set up shop. As you have probably noticed, this solution came out of racism and ethnocentricity again. They really believed that the bison were keeping the Indians from being civilized, and that it was necessary to kill off the bison in order to save the Indians from their savagery. Here are a couple of examples of this philosophy. The Secretary of the Interior, Columbus Delano, said, "I would not seriously regret the total disappearance of the buffalo, regarding it as a means of hastening their sense of dependence upon the products of the soil and their own labors." And then we have Colonel Dodge, who said, "Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone." So, in effect, this began the systematic slaughter of the bison, with rapid and devastating effects, as you can see here. The green is where the original bison range was. In 1870, it was where the yellow is, and then by 1889, the bison had been reduced to only where these little red patches are. Also, the light numbers give the date of the local extermination in that area. And the dark numbers give the number of bison as of January 1st, 1889 in the remaining areas. Just 25 here. Only 10 here. Just very, very devastating. You've got Buffalo Bill, who I'm sure you've all heard of, but did you know what he was famous for? He boasted that he killed over 4,000 bison in 18 months. And like we were just saying, there were hardly any bison left at all by 1889. Well, seeing their most important resource being slaughtered with their carcasses left to rot on the ground really exploded the hostility between the Indians and the white settlers. Crazy Horse, who is one of the most courageous and brilliant leaders of the American Indians' resistance in the plains, he encouraged the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho to make life as difficult as possible for the whites, who were settling in the Black Hills in hopes of finding gold. They led raids on the settlements. They would pretend to be hurt and lure people out and then kill them. This is a picture of bison hides just piled up so high, with this guy's just sitting right there on top of it. And remember that all the carcasses then were left to rot out in the field. They didn't use the meat or anything at all. And these are thousands of skulls of bison. So no wonder Crazy Horse and everybody was getting pretty PO'd. So one of these decoy tricks that Crazy Horse played was at Fort Phil Kearny, at what is now called the Fetterman Massacre. So the Army troops were set up to protect people taking the Bozeman Trail to mine gold in Montana. And Crazy Horse and several warriors acted as a decoy and tricked the fort's arrogant commander, Colonel Carrington, into foolishly sending a detachment of 80 soldiers after him into an ambush of 2,000 Indian warriors. Well, Colonel Fetterman's whole detachment was totally wiped out, and it was all the commander's fault. He had been told not to let anybody go over that line no matter what, and he'd been warned about the decoys, but he thought, hey, He would easily defeat any of those Native Americans. Well, oops. Oops. Wasn't easily defeated at all. Meanwhile, in Colorado, the United States went back on their word at the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1851 when they discovered gold in the Colorado mountains. Suddenly, surprise, they had this change of heart about the land that they had let the Cheyenne and Arapaho keep. So they negotiated a new treaty, which was only 10 years later, by the way, and 6 chiefs signed the Treaty of Fort Wise with the United States, and they gave up almost all of their land. They only kept 1/13 of the land. Well, they apparently didn't consult with everybody, and some of the Native Americans got pretty unhappy about this. The dog soldiers, who were the Cheyenne, just continued hunting on their land and raided and attacked the whites after that. So, in retaliation, on November 29, 1864, the U.S. Army Colonel John Shivington led an attack of 657 men of the Colorado U.S. Volunteer Cavalry on an undefended encampment at Big Sandy Creek, of which the dog soldiers didn't even have a part. They weren't even part of it. The settlement was full of Cheyenne and Arapaho women, children, and some men, some males, who had been left behind because they were too young or too old to hunt. The soldiers showed up and killed and mutilated between 70 and 163 Native Americans. And remember, 2/3 were women and children. Well, it was a big mistake for them because Crazy Horse heard about it and they got really fired up about this. All of this leads up to the Battle of Little Bighorn. So I hope you're still awake. Wake up if you're not awake, because this is a really good part. It's the high point of the whole resistance of the Sioux against the U.S. government. So pay attention. All right. So the cause of the Battle of Little Bighorn was that the Native Americans felt betrayed. Well, why do they feel betrayed? Well, the Treaty of 1868 says that no white person or persons shall be permitted to settle upon or occupy or even to pass through the Black Hills, which were sacred to the Lakota, and where they believed the Great Spirit formed them out of the ground to create them. It's a sacred area. But guess what? Gold was discovered, and so I'm not sure what's going on. Like, why were they even there? Because they weren't even supposed to be passing through, so who knows why they were even there. They were sneaking around. The little boogers. They were sneaking around. So then guess what happened? The whites decided that they wanted the Black Hills after all. Well, at first the U.S. tried to buy the land. But Sitting Bull, who is the heroic leader of the Lakota Sioux, responded, "I do not want to sell any land, not even this much," as he held a pinch of dirt. So that didn't work out. Instead, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse gathered their forces of Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho at the Little Bighorn River in Montana. So the Battle of Little Bighorn was fought on June 25th, 1876, and it was the combined forces of 10,000 Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors versus 600 U.S. troops. And it all culminated in what is known as Custer's Last Stand. Lieutenant Colonel George Custer led his 7th Cavalry to attack the Indians, and he was obliterated. It was 250 of his guys versus thousands of Indians. It was the most decisive Native American victory and the worst U.S. Army defeat in the long Plains Indians War the whole time. Yay! Go Crazy Horse! Woohoo! Go Native Americans! It was so great! Well, it was a really awesome victory, but unfortunately it enraged the white Americans. And it reinforced the idea that natives were bloody savages because they could put it in their newspapers and spin it however they wanted. So it was the greatest victory, but it unfortunately was short-lived. And that is the end of part 2. So thank you for listening, and I hope that made you think. Signing off for right now. Talk to you in a little bit.